Okay, well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. Glad to be back with you. It's sort of a new development for us. We actually were back in our offices for the first time yesterday. Not all day, but we did have a couple of meetings there. We had a staff meeting and a board meeting, so that was nice, very refreshing. Definitely starting to see a turn in the economy. I've been talking with a number of you. Things are looking up business-wise, employment-wise. So that's positive. There are still a lot of challenges out there, as we know. I do have several updates for you today, but I did want to give an opportunity for our friends at Klein & Griffin to jump on the call. And I just want to say thank you right up front to Jose and Nancy and their team. They've done great work throughout this whole crisis in supplying some really good, relevant information for our companies and organizations as it relates to employment issues throughout this. So I want to really say thank you. And I know a number of you have benefited and have said to me have benefited from the great information they have shared. So wanted to have Jose Brown from Klein & Griffin on our call today to give you guys a legal update. And he does have one particular item that he wants to share with you related to employment that, while it may not be the most positive thing in the world, is something that some of you will definitely have to deal with for your own business situation. So I'd like to give the floor to Jose and once again thank him and his team for the great work they've done and for joining us today on the call. So Jose, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Justin. I just want to make sure you can hear me okay.
You're good. Yep, you're good.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry I'm not back in the office. I had an emergency down here in Portage, so I'm talking from a parking lot out overlooking Lakeview. My daughter had a tree fall on her shed with the wind last weekend, so I'm going to help her take it down today. But I hope everything goes okay with doing this remotely, since we've been used to this for like 3 months now. So,
no, you sound very clear.
Okay, great. Well, I just let me please, if I can. I'm not very good at patting myself on the back or tell people information about my background, but I am from Shiawassee County. I did work for years ago for Judge Marudiak as a law clerk. Then I worked in the prosecutor's office. Then I took a job with Klein & Griffin back in 1984. So I've been with them for some time, 36 years now. And come July, it'll be 36 years. And I've lived in Laingsburg since 1981. So I think I have a pulse on what's happening in Shiawassee County and can hopefully add some insights to the local businesses there that are stakeholders. And before I start though, Justin, I just want to say thanks so much for having me on. I don't know what I would have done for the first 3 weeks without your organization, because you provided so much information to not only law firms. You were very helpful to us in terms of the payroll protection program, the loan forgiveness, a lot of information about employees and employers, how to handle this COVID. So every day for I don't know how many days in a row you did that 9 o'clock phone call, you had somebody that was very interesting on and that brought insights into what was happening. So I think now that we're back to closer to getting back to normal and closer to getting back to work, Justin asked me to please provide you with an update on COVID-19, and it's kind of a jury topic, but I think it has to be, it's inevitable, about how to properly reduce the workforce if you have to do that with your company. So I have a multitude of checklists and sample letters and memorandums that I can supply the individual stakeholders with. I didn't want to overwhelm you with that information in advance, so I'll try to highlight it, and then if anybody wants the information, I'll be happy to supply it to Justin. But I thought I would try to target what people wanted today. I I've been asked, excuse me, to talk about how to survive and how to make economic decisions if you have to reduce your workforce. So let me just first say that if you don't put this in writing for your employees, it didn't happen. So that's the first thing I want to tell you is if you decide that this has to be done because of the economic downturn and because of COVID, then we have to develop a plan. The employer has to develop a plan, and it has to be done in writing, or else it didn't happen. I don't know if Nancy Shinonis from my office is on the line, but I'll just give a short shout out to her because she's very good. This is 80% of her practices in employee relationships, and she knows this information cold. But she can assist if you decide that you want to further pursue this with our office or any law firm. But let me just start out by telling you that there are certain checklists, there are certain websites that you can visit that will give you an oversight of how to properly do a reduction in workforce. I did supply Justin with one from Mercer. It's a human resources company in New York City, and it's probably too big for what we need, but it kind of gives you an oversight of how to handle a reduction in workforce. That link was given to Justin, and I'm sure that he'll put it up. But I have it up on my computer now. If anybody wants to discuss the checklists that are involved in this Mercer website, but essentially in an oversight fashion, there's approximately 6 things you have to do to try to cut down from that 15. And I wanted to just cover those bullet points with you and then answer questions that you may have about those bullet points. One is if you decide that you have to, because of the economic downturn that may be anticipated here and may occur, you have to identify how you're going to lay off or how you're going to actually discharge a particular employee. And there's a difference between a layoff and a discharge. And if there are workers that you're going to discharge that are over the age of 40, there are certain parameters, certain federal regulations that kick in. There's approximately at least seven federal regulations that apply. These are covered in the Mercer link that I supplied to you. But the problem with Googling and looking at the websites and the checklists is they're usually not targeted towards Michigan. They're usually not targeted towards Shiawassee County and to smaller businesses. The website that I asked you to look at kind of gives you an overall view, but it doesn't specifically address what has to happen here in Michigan and the proper way to do it to avoid litigation in Michigan. So there are several federal websites that you need to be aware of. WARN is one of them, WARN. That only really applies to employers that have more than 100 employees, so it probably is not significant for purposes of Shiawassee County. But there are federal regulations that are in place for all of us that have less than 100 employees and even just a very small workforce. That includes the Age Discrimination in Employment Act. It includes COBRA. If we have to extend COBRA if there's medical benefits to an employee down the line. It probably does not. Family Medical Leave Act is probably not going to be applicable to most employees, but that carries less of a workforce than 100. So that's be important. Workers' comp is definitely important. Unemployment is definitely regulations that are going to assess whether an employee should be let go, laid off, terminated, or what you're going to do with the downsize. And then, of course, unemployment and workers' comp, those both have Michigan rules to comply with. And most websites won't supply you with the information for the Michigan rules. So again, that's why it's important, I think, to have a local attorney or local law firm to assist you if you need the help. And before I go on, I just want to let you know that there is no charge for anybody that's a stakeholder in SEDP to call Nancy or I to discuss what needs to be done. I'm happy to do this, and I'm so excited that I really am. I mean, it's a down topic, but I'm excited that Justin asked me to talk today. So I want to cover a few things about some considerations to be given if you decide to do this. I don't think it's a good idea for me just to preach to the choir and say these are what needs to be done. Some considerations need to be discussed, I think, and possibly the question and answer period is the best way to do this. Some considerations in reduction in workforces. You probably have to get your accountant involved. If you don't have an accountant or you're small enough that you're kind of doing everything yourself, then you have to still implement a written plan for communication to your employees. You have to select the appropriate employees to be discharged or laid off, and you have to comply with these federal regulations that we've just discussed. So it requires some tweaking, and it requires some definite consideration in the written plan to reduce your workforce in the event that people are over the age of 40, people are minorities, employees have a certain religious. You have to be very, very careful about those types of issues. And then for longer term employees, there has to be considerations of the economics. If you're going to lay somebody off or discharge someone because they've been with your company for a long time and they're at the top end of the salary, you still need to consider a lot of other things, such as the pension plan, the profit sharing, and the legal obligations that you would owe to them under the Family Medical Leave Act, or possibly the elderly workers above 40 Act, because you have to give them certain time period, 21 days if you discharge one employee over the age of 40. It has to be up to 45 days if it's two employees over the age of 40. So there are many considerations to implement and to consider. Termination versus layoff is a big one. Right now, there's a lot of people that are considering, well, I don't know if I want to return to work because I can make more on unemployment than I can returning to work. These obviously are probably not your higher end paid employees, someone that's been with your company for a long period of time, but it's still a consideration. The gap is closing on that issue because the pandemic monies are going to be running out here at the end of July. And I don't believe there's been there's consideration for an extension, but I don't believe that that's heating up to allow that right now. So that's certainly a consideration, and how to handle that if people decide they don't want to come back because they can make more on unemployment than they can coming back to the office. It's awful short-sighted because that money's going to run out very soon. So some of the considerations also require what should we do to avoid litigation. So the steps that I suggested about a written plan, communication to your employees, selection of the appropriate employees, deciding whether termination or layoff is the correct way to go, compliance with the federal and state regulations, and then meeting with the employee and communicating in writing, because again, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen. And then you have to lay out for them what fringe benefits that they would have available to them should they be discharged from your employment. So that gives you, in a nutshell, I believe what is necessary to make those decisions. Now, the steps of going through that are obviously much more involved and much more detailed than I'm really able to discuss in a short time period this morning, but I'm certainly willing to answer any broad questions or answers that you might have with regards to these particular issues. Now, this may not be related to COVID, but I just give you one example that kind of gives you some, might trigger some questions. Family Medical Leave Act, do people have to come back if they've utilized the Family Medical Leave Act under COVID-19 for reasons like daycare, for reasons that they may have obtained or may have had family members in their household who have had COVID? Can you force them to return back to work? The triggering point of this is that if even without COVID, even if you had to do a downsizing of your company because of the economic downturn, then there are considerations for even people that don't want to return to work, that don't want to that want to use COVID-19. I don't want to say it as an excuse, but you hear so many people. I have daycare to contend with. I have kids at home to contend with. I have elderly parents that I'm at home. I can't return to work. So Family Medical Leave Act is utilized. So that plays a huge impact on the proper way to do this. The old rules of just following these steps that I just provided to you is impacted by COVID and impacted by the monies that we now receive, that people are now receiving under unemployment and under the pandemic fund, and also under payroll protection. So those are all considerations because of COVID that result not only just because there's an economic downturn, but because that has to flow in and be factored in to how to properly reduce your workforce. So that's why it becomes a little bit more complicated when you have the impact of COVID on top of a RIF, a reduction in force issue. So again, thank you for allowing me to talk. If there's, please, Justin, if there's questions and answers, I'm happy to try to answer them.
Thank you, Jose. Very informative. And yes, this is a major issue, particularly this issue of bringing people back from unemployment. I do obviously, hear some. I don't want to use the word positivity, but you're right. I do think the stimulus is going to be running out, at least the big money, the federal money, by the end of July, which will probably precipitate more people, wanting to come back and not be on unemployment. But, I guess the question I have, and I'll kick it off here, is, I know companies, there's a lot of companies that are dealing with this issue of people don't want to come back. They want to collect the check as long as they can. And companies I've talked to either don't want to fight it or don't know how to fight it, or figure that, boy, the state is so backed up right now that even if I tried to fight it, it's going to take forever on a claim that is not worthy. So I guess what would be, if there's companies on the line that are dealing with that type of situation, and I'm sure there's several, what should a company do? What's the checklist for them? What's the first thing they should do to deal with that person or persons?
Well, Justin, I think the first answer to that is I think if you can ride the storm out to the end of July, that you should try to do that before implementing a reduction in force, because the reduction in force is going to take longer than the 6 weeks that we have now that's left in the pandemic pay. So I think that you will see that issue go away after the end of July if there's not a $600 a week. I mean, the unemployment issue, that is not probably likely to go away, but the additional monies from the stimulus package of $600 a week will probably come to an end at July. I don't hear that it's going to be extended. I hear the possibility of stimulus packages for purposes of, but even the payroll protection now that we have, that second go round is not fully utilized. So there's still monies available for that. So I think that the stimulus package is going to run out here at the end of July. And if you can wait to make decisions on the reduction in force, because even to implement a program to do this, if you were to do it now, it's going to take a bit, and you won't have that issue in 6 weeks from now. I mean, you've got to give notice to the employees. You've got to put a plan together, figure out which employees are going to be discharged, whether you want to offer them a severance package, what should go into the severance package. There's a lot of issues to deal with that will take longer than the July time period. So I say wait it out and try to suck it up for another 6 weeks before you would implement such a plan. So that's the easy answer, Justin, is to punt it down the road. The harder answer is it requires an individual face-to-face, I think, with the employer to say, look, this is what we want to do. These employees won't come back for this reason, whether it's due to COVID or whether it's due to the unemployment concern. Can we fire them? Can we discharge them? That's another issue, because it requires a fact by fact or a case by case look at things before I would be able to give you a generalized answer. So I hope that helps.
No, it does.
Okay. So
it does.
I think punt first, Justin is the first answer, and then revisit it after July.
Okay, that's good. I have one more question, then I want to open it up to the floor. This is a little bit of a different tack, Jose, but it's still a legal question. One thing that is probably definitely going to be around for quite a while will be conditions or protocols that businesses have to follow to create a safe environment for their workers and their customers. And I think, I'll say right up front, I think Shiawassee County is doing a tremendous job in terms of trying their best. The businesses trying their best to make sure, everyone has masks and all that. But I've also heard a couple of anecdotal stories about, well, maybe they're not doing enough, or my employer's not offering enough masks, or we don't have enough distancing, and it's creating a challenging environment. I mean, how should and I know we're in a whole new frontier here, Jose, but how should businesses be looking at legal issues related to safety protocols and plans? I mean, is this going to be a huge enforcement issue? I mean, who does it? Is it local? Is it MIOSHA? Anything you can speak to on safety regulations?
Justin, we're looking into that on a daily basis, because we have a lot of clients that are healthcare providers that, for example, they do the elective surgeries. So I would think that the protocols for them are going to be much stricter than they are for somebody that's in an industrial or in a different work environment, just because of the fact that they could be exposed to patients coming in, and they could also expose patients. So I think the best way to handle it, there's so many guidelines, and Governor Whitmore has implemented the return to work, the safety protocols that she has. And there are certain bullet points on there about whether the employees have to have temperatures when they come in, whether they can social distance, whether you stagger your workforce, whether you put up a plexiglass to avoid aerosol contact with clients, customers, and the employees. One person in the bathroom, break room advice. For example, we just opened up our offices yesterday, so I'm pretty familiar with all the return to work safety protocols, and I can certainly provide that again in a memo form to you, Justin. But I don't think those are going to be relaxed. When they are relaxed, they're going to be relaxed through another executive order. And I think that you need to implement those. Our office had to pay thousands of dollars to retrofit our office to make it look like a hockey arena with dashboards and plexiglass, so that the employees and the clients are safe, because we can't socially distance in a small hall that we have in our office. So I think once that's implemented, once the employer does that, then it's very difficult for an employee to say, I didn't have a mask. If there's not masks available, there's not hand sanitizer, or the cleaning company isn't coming in and sanitizing a couple of times a day, then you have a problem as an employer, because you're not supplying the safety protocols that you're supposed to implement, and you could be considered creating a hostile environment if you're forcing people to come to work without the proper PPE, and not, for instance, implementing just common things like in the break room. How many people can be in the break room? Can there be 3? Like the water cooler talks cannot happen anymore until we're through this. Those are all part of the safety protocols that have to be initiated. So I'm happy to supply the governor's return to work safety protocols again and send those to you. And if they're not complied with, an employer's could have a significant difficulty with forcing employees to come back in those circumstances. And
Thank you, Jose.
And the payroll protection program, Justin will pay for some of that. The PPP will cover some of that if people have those loans available. And hopefully.
Thank you for mentioning that. I just learned that is one of the new, and this may not be helpful for those that have already exercised and finished all their PPP money, but yes, that was one of the new provisions in the PPP guidelines, that company expenses related to all that safety stuff can be an eligible expense you can use for your PPP loan and get that forgiven as a grant. So thank you for mentioning that.
Well, that's correct, Justin, and that would be the second go round. I don't think it was available in the first go round. But the second go round, it's now available because people haven't used all their money yet.
Right. Okay. Very, very good. I want to open up the floor. We've covered a lot of good information, but does anybody have any comments or questions for Jose? Hit *6 on your phone, please.
Justin, this is Nancy Shinonis from Klein and Griffin. I just wanted to add one more thing to what Jose was just talking about.
Sure.
If there's an upset employee about safety protocols not being followed, if an employee files a complaint or contacts what they believe is an appropriate public body, so if they contact LARA or OSHA or any other government agency, the employer could be faced with a Whistleblower Protection Act violation if the employer retaliates because of that complaint. So I just want to caution all of the employers listening in on your call not to fly off the handle and fire an employee who contacts OSHA, but try to work with that employee to make sure that the employee feels safe at work, because they could buy themselves a lawsuit by taking a hot-tempered reaction to a complaint. And if it's something where the employee is trying to make trouble, that's something that the employer should talk with their legal counsel about, and there's ways to deal with that. But you want to be very careful not to take adverse employment action against an employee who reports some type of safety violation to OSHA or LARA or any other government agency, because it could land them in whistleblower litigation.
Thank you, Nancy. Good point. Any comments or questions from anybody on the call? Hit *6 on your phone, please. Anybody have any comments or questions for Jose or Nancy? *6. Okay. So Jose, you did send me some information this morning. I did get that checklist. But if you have additional information, this is for you too, Nancy. If you have additional information that you would like me to send out to our list, please pass that along to me, and I'll make sure we get that out to everybody.
You're welcome, Justin. I just want to say one last thing, and that's thank you for having me on. This is not a plug for getting legal work. It's a plug to try to help the local businesses in Shiawassee County. Okay, so thanks
you
again.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Justin.
Yep. And thank you both. Yeah, thank you, Jose. Thank you, Nancy. Very much appreciate your collaboration throughout all this. And but all that being said, if you do have questions related to this, definitely feel free to get a hold of Jose or Nancy. And when I send that information out, their contact information will be in there. So thank you, Jose and Nancy.
You're welcome.
Thank you. A few other items I wanted to cover quickly. We are having a call today at 2:00 for those businesses and organizations that would like to learn about getting plugged into Michigan State University, specifically related to hiring for interns and graduates. So as we've talked before, they have a very strong interest in strengthening their ties in Shiawassee County. Turns out that nearly 500 people live in Shiawassee County and work at MSU, almost $25 million of economic impact from just those people. So that, coupled with the fact that we're part of the Lansing region, they're definitely more interested in working with us. So we've been polling some of our stakeholders, and that has been something that is of interest to get into the university and try to tie in on hiring opportunities. So you should have seen that call in 2:00 today. No more than 1 hour. We're going to introduce you to some of the leadership over there at MSU and begin making those connections. I've sent out, several emails, so some of this will look familiar from your inbox. We did have a very good cybersecurity webinar last Thursday after the call. I know a few of you participated on that. We did send out a video replay. But if any of you have cybersecurity issues, questions related to your organization, take a look at that video and feel free to contact the company BitLift. This is the one that's locating in downtown Owasso. We're going to have a local business that can provide that cybersecurity service. So that was one. We did get final approval on moving ahead with the CASE program. That is the energy efficiency program for companies that want to do improvements, heating, cooling, roofs, windows, things like that. The Board of Commissioners scheduled a public hearing in July to finalize that. I did a presentation last week on it. So once again, if any companies are interested in exploring energy efficiency improvements and getting some financing to do that, please let us know. Along those lines, I did send out a nice video that our friends at Consumers Energy put together on different energy programs, a way to save money, things like that. We've had Catherine Burkholder from Consumers on before. They're a great partner for us. They definitely do a lot to help business. But if you have any utility concerns, comments, questions, if you're looking for rebates, you name it, we'll be happy to get you plugged in, but check out that video. There is a PMBC webinar coming up on the 25th. I emailed that out to the group yesterday. This is related to, we've been talking about PMBC all along through this, Pure Michigan Business Connect. Those are for businesses that, at the core of it, we talked about plugging into COVID-19 opportunities, companies that wanted to repurpose, retool for products and services related to COVID-19. But it's a great resource for any business that is looking to pivot or diversify into new sectors. In fact, we were on a call with a company yesterday morning that's looking potentially for new customers, and it's a resource, a database, a website, a matchmaking service. That's probably a better way to put it. for companies that want to try to find new customers in new sectors across the state of Michigan. So if you are in that boat, if you're trying to get new customers and identify new opportunities, you definitely want to get plugged into the PMBC program, and they're doing a webinar on that June 25th. Check your email on that. This got announced at the end of last week. I know a few of you on the call applied for the MEDC loans. So testing everyone's memory, going back to the end of March, beginning of April, we had the MEDC grants and MEDC loans. The grants were awarded at the time to 23 businesses in Shiawassee County across 8 communities. The loans had to go to our state economic development group, MEDC, for approval. It took a long time to get through the system, but it did get announced at the end of last week that Shiawassee County is getting 2 loans. We were only able to get 2 because the dollars were very, very limited. But those 2 recipients of those loan dollars are the Lebowski Theater, our performing arts group in downtown Owasso, and the DeMar Banquet and Conference Center on North 52 in Owasso Charter Township. So we had, as I said, a lot of demand, a lot of great businesses applied for it. Unfortunately, we couldn't get it to everybody. I am pleased that those 2 did get it. They are obviously very strong community institution type businesses and have been completely shut down due to the virus. They've had no opportunity to be able to reopen because they're gathering places, they're event centers. So I did want to give everyone an update on that, so you were aware. We hadn't talked about the loans in probably at least a month or 6 weeks. So that's the latest on that. I am going to send out some new information on the WorkShare program. I've been hearing more and more companies taking advantage of WorkShare. We've talked about it probably a half a dozen times on the call. The time is running out with the federal money, as Jose talked about, but basically it's an opportunity for you to have, in most cases, a very slight reduction in worker time on the job. They only have to be off a minimum of 10%, but they can then collect that $600 unemployment stimulus through the federal government. So it's a way to, try to somehow deal with that issue of unemployment as well. By having sort of a dual, they can work and collect unemployment. So, once again, I know several of you are doing it. If you're not, something you definitely want to maybe take a look at. And then finally, PPE, we continue to get requests for products and services for safety measures. We continue to maintain that list. We send it out probably, several times a week, I would say. I think we're up to 19 businesses now. So as always, if you need product services, let us know. Testing available as well through Memorial. We always mention that for the virus or antibody if you need that. And then, of course, jobs. If anyone needs jobs posted, filled, please let us know. We're happy to promote. So a lot of stuff, but once again, thank you to Jose and Nancy from Klein and Griffin for offering some legal insights on employment issues. Does anyone have any comments or questions for me before we wrap up today? It's star 6, please.
Justin, Mike Gillette from Beechcraft.
Yeah, Mike, go ahead.
I didn't know if Jody's on the line or Cheryl, but specific question. I have an employee that will go back under PPP that I suspect, he's decided by his omission to not show up to work that he's quit now. However, I'm wondering if he's double dipped and still collect his unemployment as well as collecting payroll from me. I tried to get a hold of unemployment insurance agency. I get dumped into the phone queue, no luck there. Went online to MyWham. Tried to do an online chat, says, sorry, try again later. So the only thing I was able to do was to send a message. I know when I spoke to Jody and Cheryl about a week ago, they said that I need to notify UIA within 30 days that the employee is separating from employment from me. So I'm trying to do that. Any suggestions?
I am on, Mike. This is Jody.
Hello.
You said you did put a message in through your MyWham account?
Yeah.
Sorry, that cut out. You did submit a message?
That is correct. I did submit a message, yes.
Okay. I do know, I've heard from some other people who have had to submit messages that they are still very overwhelmed. So it is taking a little while for the messages to be reviewed. I would assume because you have filed that, it does keep that in your record, that would show that you did it within the 30-day time frame. But I would wait a few days just to see. It is taking some time even to reply just to those messages because they are still so overwhelmed from what I've heard.
Okay. My curiosity is, has this employee been double dipping? Can UIA tell me? Because I didn't get any notifications. Usually you get a 2-week notice that such and such employee is unemployed and they received this amount of benefits and your account's been charged this. But during the COVID, none of us have received any of that updated information. So how do I query that to find out if in fact he did do that?
Mike, this is Jose.
Yes, sir.
What I would suggest you do is get on the chat line, but do it after 5 o'clock. The reason you do it after 5 o'clock is because then you go in the queue, and usually first thing in the morning, you might be closer to the top of the list. I think by putting it in the chat line, you protected yourself to make the inquiry within the 30-day time period, okay? And I've had some clients that have had some success by emailing them at night after 5 o'clock because then you happen to shoot to the top of the list for the next morning. So that's much better than phone calling. So that's just a suggestion, and they will tell you if specifically if he has not put his confirmation in, which he's required to do every 2 weeks, and you inquire about that, then they will put a hold on his checks for purposes of investigating the fraud. I've had a couple of clients that have opened up a second account just because they didn't get the pandemic, and it's been a real mess. They had 2 accounts open, and then both accounts were closed out. They were investigated for fraud because unemployment thought they may be double dipping. So I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll give that.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the answers.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Jody. Other comments? *6. Anybody else have anything? Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. We will be back on Thursday. Speaker TBD. We'll definitely let you know on Wednesday who that is. If anything else comes up in the meantime, feel free to call or email. Thanks, everyone.